the first one, Kenneth, you got everybody involved here. क्या हो गया इस बार?
Sorry.
All right, we are on. Ken, over to you.
Hi, Satish. Good to see you.
Sorry, not getting.
Are you able to hear?
Yeah, we can hear you, Ken.
Oh.
Yeah, we can hear. Yeah, go ahead.
No, hi everyone, and good to see a few faces again. Been a while, and obviously lots has happened over the last year. I think for me in particular, it's my second chance at presenting, and just going to talk about previously, the very first session that I'd taken was more about finance and investing in general, but this one's a lot more personal. This one is largely about my own experiences starting up, and was slightly different from the usual capital raising side, because I pretty much ran a bootstrapped business for 5 years of my life from 2010 to 2015, and then from 2015 to 2020 it's been another avatar, but it's a very different. So I'll talk about both of these stints in this session, but really is a lot of interest that we have within our batch right now in people who are at a point where they're looking to do things on their own, starting up. A large number of people have started up or are about to start up, and really that's the context in which we circulated a small survey link. I think not everyone here had filled it in, but about 27, 28 people had filled it in, and at least for me it was quite eye-opening. I think these are 3-4 key things that were inputs into my talk that I wanted to share. One was that at least out of the 30 respondents, I think it was 29, but I'll say 30 to be simple, 50% had either run their own business or invested in a startup. This to me at least seemed a little higher. Of course, there is a selection bias because the topic is bootstrapping, so there must be a little bit of a selection bias, but definitely was surprising to me that so many people had started up or invested in a startup. Of those who didn't, 75% perceived it to be too risky, and the reason they didn't necessarily start up was they perceived it to be too risky. And another 25% said that they either refining their idea or really looking for the right time, or had come close and then stepped away, etc. Very surprisingly for me at least, 90%, which is 25 out of the 27 people at that point of time, said that they wanted to run a small profitable business than a business that goes out and raises multiple levels of funding. I would have thought that, especially given the whole boom around funding, etc., a larger number of people, and also the number of companies that, exist in the whole startup space, I would have thought that it'd be larger. But most people just kind of want to run a small profitable business, is what they said. And most interestingly, I think, I don't know if Sunil Mishra is here, but if Sunil or Praveen are here, I think 100% are keen to invest in a startup or have already done so in some form or fashion. I think the last part of it was that there were about 3 or 4 folks who said that their job gave them all the entrepreneurial excitement and freedom that they desire, and hence they weren't interested in starting up. Of course, several of them have spoken and shared why they enjoy the job a lot. Dimant was one, Vishal Gupta was another, Umesh was another, Bala, I think also. So 3-4 people, I don't remember exactly, I may have got one name wrong, but 3 or 4 people had specifically written that the reason they weren't starting up was because their job gave them all the freedom and everything that they wanted in terms of being able to do what they want to and achieve what they want to. And I think that is a wonderful place to be if you're there, right? The one other really interesting thing that I found, which I must point out, was that, while you had people admiring Rakesh Jhunjhunwala and Jeff Bezos and names that would be a little bit more expected, I was very, very amazed to find Vishal Gupta actually named his boss as the person that he looked up to. And of course, it also married with the fact that he thought that his job gave him all the freedom and entrepreneurial experience that we also heard from him about the amazing experience that he had in Africa, etc. But I thought that was very fascinating because I think a lot of the desire that people have to run a business of their own, startup, etc. When Satish and I were talking, I think a large part of it is driven also by the fact that there is dissatisfaction with your workplace, which oftentimes is just dissatisfaction with your immediate boss, etc. So I think it's great to find at least some people to be in such a happy zone that they're perfectly pleased. But that is the context, I think, in which I'm going to talk about today. The session that I'm taking, where I'm essentially looking to share what we did when we started up, me and my partner. Broadly, just 5-6 parts to it. I think the first is just bootstrapping and what, a lot of these terms are loosely used, and I'm just going to kind of define what I am talking about when I'm talking about bootstrapping, specifically what my experience was, etc. The second, I think, for most people who are looking to go out and do something on their own, there are really two paths. In matrix terms, the red pill or the blue pill. One approach is to do things on your own, go out and build a business completely bootstrapped. And the second approach is where you go out and fundraise. And I think just wanted to talk about some of the factors that influence that decision of whether to bootstrap or to fundraise. Of course, go on from there into the pros and cons of bootstrapping that I experienced and my thoughts. Of course, caveat all of this by saying that this is, the world as seen from my eyes and my opinion. Everybody has a very, very different take on it. We'll also just take a minute or so, and not everybody might actually know what I was doing. So Brokers Please Excuse Private Limited was what I was running, and those 5 years, just want to take people very quickly through the origin of how I actually quit my job to do something that was completely unrelated, what we did for funding it, etc., and why we exited it and moved on from there in 2015. Lastly, I think, as I was saying, there have been two parts of my entrepreneurial journey. The first has been when I was a founder myself. And so just sharing things and experiences from my time as a founder. But 2015 to now 2021, I've also been on the other side where I've been an investor, and just thought that it'd be good to also share some of my experiences from that side, because if you are going to go down the fundraising route, etc., then that other perspective might be useful for someone who's not had direct exposure to the whole VCP world. So that's a very quick capture. Any comments, etc., happy to take them along the way rather than keep it bottled up. So at this point, any comments anybody has, happy to take them, else I can go on. Cool. So, when I'm talking about bootstrapping, I'm really talking about, growing your business with little or no capital or outside investment. For those of you who kind of are in the US or in the Valley, you would, of course, have read a lot of Paul Graham. And he talks about this term called ramen profitable. And he says that you need to get your own business very quickly to the point where at least it can support your own lifestyle. The first part of it, of course, is your definition of a lifestyle. As Amit has explained and spoken about 2 times over, your own lifestyle is completely a function of what you choose to do. And hence, of course, ramen profitability, which is supporting your own, it comes from basically being able to cook your own Maggie and support yourself in a dorm room. But effectively, a large part of it is also comes down to the lifestyle choices that you make and then being able to support that. But really, when I'm talking about bootstrapping, I'm talking about starting a business with very, very limited amount of capital, starting a business and running it yourself with your own resources. And also, specifically, I'm talking about a person who is, there's also a bunch of founders who make spectacular exits, and when they're starting their own business the second time around, they're doing it with 10, 15, $20 million that they're rolling into it. I'm not counting that as bootstrapping, although technically, they are doing it with their own resources, and that is bootstrapping. But I'm just talking about, in Indian terms, doing it with some sum of money between 5 lakh and 50 lakh rupees of your own that you're coming in to a business with. In the US construct, it'll probably be a little larger, but that's really what I'm talking about. The second is that, all kinds of businesses, people can run a B2B business. A lot of times, when you're doing something, if I look at my second avatar, which is my current business, which is a financial investing business, it's what I've done my entire life. I already had clients, and when I went out to do this, I already had networks. It was B2B in that, each client, after 5 or 6 years, I have less than 40 clients, and that's enough for us to run a reasonably comfortable practice. So, a lot of those things make it easier. But my first stint, which is what I'm focusing on here, is where I'm talking, and the business that I currently run, or a lot of B2B businesses, you'll have 3-4 good guys, and they will be all that you require. But what I'm talking about is a more retail business where you're doing new client acquisition, where no one client is, going to move the needle. For us, for example, we used to have a simple metric of per broker that we had in our business. We needed at least 10 new clients every month. And in the 5 years, we grew to a point where we were onboarding about 250 odd clients every single month. And so that's really what I'm talking about, which is, multiple offices, lots of people, a business that requires a lot of input, both in terms of client acquisition, customer servicing, etc., and it's retail. I'm also not talking about, 1-2-man consulting or side gigs. I'm really talking about where you're doing this full time. A lot of times you'll find that people are in a job of their own, and then they have a side gig where they're funding that, and it's a great way to do it. Also, a lot less, but that's not really something that I have had experience. And in fact, when I've tried to do that, whenever I've tried to do that, it hasn't worked out very well for me personally. So I'm talking about doing something full time and going out and having offices and hiring people, etc. I think the other part of it is that, and this is where I was surprised that so many people would be comfortable. Maybe some part of it was just the framing, but so many people aspired to run a small business that was profitable and kept scaling at 10, 12, 15% a year. If we go out and look at our own careers over the last 20 years, we'll see that our own salaries and our own kind of careers have grown at far higher than that. And so one of the things that is the problem with a lot of us, I think, is just the fact that that is our benchmark, really. And so I really think that, for a lot of people, for example, running a small shop might be enough. But when you come out of KREC, and especially if you've gone out and worked in a top-tier professional organizations, which is almost everyone here, then, a lot of your aspirations, etc., are really much larger. And if you're going to do something full-time, then you will want it to scale. And if it doesn't scale, then it'll get old and tired, and it will rapidly become stale. And hence, I'm really talking about something which, we're looking to hopefully make a big dent in the universe. Whether we do it or don't is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the aspiration to go out and do something there. And lastly, I think one of the things that I must tell folks is that, especially hiring and retaining employees and partners can become very, very tough if your sector gets several highly funded competitors, right? Sometimes bootstrapping might just struggle because the sector gets hot. And the reason I put this out there is because it's something that I experienced. Pretty much exactly what we were doing was what housing.com started going out and doing, and was going out and poaching a lot of our team. Customers were being offered stuff for free and things like that, which made business difficult. But also, very close friends of mine who continue to be in business, and folks that we have funded, we're experiencing it in India and edtech in a big way. EdTech, even including Career Launcher, etc., used to be a small, profitable kind of really nice business that you did because you liked education, etc. But for those of you who follow the news around the Indian edtech space, about 11 or 12 days ago, a professor with a little bit of a brand name got actually hired by one of these edtech companies for a salary of 25 crore rupees a year. And really, if you're a small little business that doesn't have a Masayoshi Son backing you, how do you compete with people hiring professors at 25 crore salaries? And so I think a lot of what I say comes with the caveat that, there might come times or phases in your life, especially in a particular sector or industry, where bootstrapping has become a lot more, it is difficult to begin with, but it will become a lot more difficult than it usually is, simply because of this fact. I just need to get a charger. Give me 1 second and I'll be back. Sorry, guys. Right, can I go on?
Yeah.
Perfect. I think the first big piece that Smashy and I really spoke about this presentation, and he and I have had pretty much parallel, separated by geography, separated by sectors, and separated by industries. Both of us have started up and run it for a reasonable period of time. And I think the first thing that I really, for those of you who are looking to start up yourself or generally are interested in the startup space, I think one of the biggest things that people struggle to understand is that largely these are alternatives that are not compatible with each other. In other words, people who run bootstrapped businesses and really run businesses on a day-to-day basis out of their own resources will oftentimes struggle to understand why their competitors in the same space are able to raise so much capital and why they aren't able to, despite having in their minds clearly superior businesses on most metrics. And the flip is also true, which is that people who get onto the fundraising treadmill, as it's called, will struggle. It's not like you can get onto that treadmill and raise a bunch of capital and then focus on running a profitable business. The two are almost mutually exclusive. And I think this is the one big learning that at least I had, because going in to starting up on my own, one of the thoughts obviously was that I'd like to raise capital from VCs, and but as I went out and met a bunch of those VCs, etc., it was very clear that what they were looking for was not what I was doing, and what I was doing was not what they were looking to fund. And a bunch of these things really you need to kind of understand and make your peace with, because not understanding this is the worst thing is if you kind of flip-flop between the two. You start bootstrapping and then you go out into the market and then you start saying that, oh, everybody's getting funded, I also want to get funded, and then you start running on a completely different set of metrics. And I don't think one is superior to the other. I think Satish had talked about it in his talk also, about how these are completely different worlds and what VCs look for, and how every business may not be amenable to going out and raising funds, etc. But really the simplest way I think that one can explain it is that you'll hear of people who are serial entrepreneurs and who have been able to raise capital 5 times over, even though they've succeeded or they've failed 4 times out. And one of the things that they really do, when we as investors today speak to speak to people who are looking to raise capital, quite often you will find these wonderfully perfect founders who understand VCs perfectly. They understand exactly what the VC is looking for, and that's what they are kind of reverse engineering for. And I'm not even saying this in a bad way. It is just a fact of life that VCs will raise money with certain mandates, and oftentimes if your mandate is X, then that's what you're looking to. So in other words, assuming I went out and raised a big fat, so somebody I know recently launched a really big fund that is focused on the entire meat replacement market, right? The fund has been raised with a very simple mandate that, beyond an impossible burger together are really only scratching the surface right now. Going forward, the whole plant-based or meat grown in a lab, there are 2-3 ways in which this problem is being attacked. But really, it is quite clear that even if this becomes 10% of the market, you're talking of 100x growth from here. And what they've done is they've gone out and raised a pretty large fund, which has a very simple mandate that they will participate in the entire market for meat replacement, right? And they are investing in companies from the valley all the way to Japan and everything in between, right? So they are going and investing in Israeli food tech companies, in UK, in Europe, in America, in listed companies. I think one of the two, Beyond or Impossible, is listed, so they've taken a big stake there. But they're really going all across and saying, I want to participate in this space. What this literally means is that tomorrow, if there's someone in India who's looking to create a meat replacement product for Jains in India, for want of a better example, who's going to say, hey, a lot of Jains today are actually exercising and need protein and they can't eat meat, and I'm going to create a product for that. Chances are that they will get funded by these guys, because these guys will literally give $100,000 to everybody who starts up in this space, right? Their aim is to invest in about 75 companies at the seed stage, and they'll give $100,000 to 75 companies. Now, it doesn't matter, if you are, for example, growing, for example, Vijay shared with the group that he was doing jaggery. It may be in the food space, it may be a huge business, it may be very profitable, etc., but it is not meat replacement, right? And hence, it's not going to get funded. Whereas someone with only a PowerPoint and a friend who's been working in a lab somewhere trying to develop like a meat alternative will get funded by these guys purely on the promise and potential, right? Because that's their mandate. And really, a lot of times, fundraising is really about, we read about KREC and we read about a bunch of these Indian fintechs that are raising what are frankly ridiculously large sums of money of the order of hundreds of millions of dollars. And really, when I was talking to someone at Sequoia, which is going out and funding a bunch of these, they've gone out and raised capital that they are deploying in about 30-odd startups across the world, which is basically a one-line mandate. They want to attack Visa and MasterCard's monopoly on payments. And hence, they're going out and funding a bunch of people. Now, that profit pool is almost $100 billion. And they're saying, we're going after this pool. It doesn't matter if we burn $500 billion in 30 companies and attacking this profit pool. And that's really what they're looking to do, which means that a bunch of absolutely seemingly random companies that just have one target segment, which is the credit card processing fees, are going to get funded by these guys. And the best of them are going to keep raising infinite funding because it's such a large annual profit pool that they're going after, right? So I think one of the things that a lot of us, especially who are, as I said, 50% of people who are running their own businesses, stroke startups, really struggle to do is understand that fundraising is a completely different game. And, if you're trying to run a profitable company that's going to be, focused on being around no matter what happens, it is fundamentally incompatible with a fundraising kind of company, which is going to raise capital and go on to raise that capital, burn that capital, go to the next step, raise 10x that capital and raise 100x that capital, because that's the trajectory that people are funding them for, right? And so really, both of them are extremely difficult. It's not that one is better versus the other. Both of them are extremely difficult. And as a founder, it is important that you pick your poison, right? It's important that you choose which one of these two alternatives are really what you are going to. And some of that, like I said, is a function of what your business is and what your environment is. If you are in a, as I said, if you're running a nice little kirana store somewhere, it is great for you. If you're running a small media company that makes videos for clients because everybody needs content today, probably going to be very profitable. But if you're going to try and go out and raise capital on that, it's going to be very difficult to do that. And so it's very, very important that you pick your poison carefully and choose which route to take, because from the very beginning, a lot of the decisions that you make are going to be determined by the route that you want to take. If you want to fundraise, you will have to be a hyper growth, high cash burn. There are the rare examples of people who are able to do both. And usually, if I were to put a percentage number to that, I think it would be 1% of 1% of people who are able to do both. And usually when that is the case, it is bootstrapped companies that become very large and then become very attractive and hit upon a really sweet spot. They then go out and are able to fundraise meaningfully and pivot from being, small little comfortable businesses to high growth businesses. But, I can't think of too many companies that have actually been able to manage both. It's usually one or the other. And so I think it's a very, very important decision. I think far more important than, what business you want to do or what startup you want to run, I think is the route that you want to take. And everything else is secondary. Just sharing, for example, my own experience. I was very clear that I was stepping away from the financial industry. But I was not clear on what I was doing. For people who might not know, I ran a startup in the real estate broking space. It was called Brokers Please Excuse. And it was after quitting my job, I had decided that this is my partner. We are going to do something together. Loosely, we had 2-3 fields, but we had not zoned in on which one it exactly was at the point where we put in our papers. And then we kind of focused on real estate, etc. But I think some of these decisions of your co-founder, of your mode of funding, etc., are far more important than the actual business, because the business will keep pivoting. What we started out doing versus what we ended up doing were completely different from each other exactly 4 months after we started, right? So the business model that people obsess on, etc., I think is absolutely irrelevant. It is the loose space. We were clear that we wanted to do something in the real estate space because it was very unorganized. There was lots of money. There was lots of opportunity. Obviously, it was a monster-sized market. But exactly what we wanted to do was, although at that point in time, we obviously agonized over it and put business models together, etc. When we hit the market in 3 months' time, it was utterly irrelevant, right? So I think on the bootstrapping topic, bootstrapping or fundraising is a very, very important decision. And, speak to all the people that you can on this one, because this call determines the actions that you take in the first year of working. And I think a lot of people don't give it enough thought, especially in my experience of, the last 10 years of working with a whole bunch of founders. I think people don't appreciate the fact that these are such different choices. If I were to kind of, just talk about the pros and cons of bootstrapping, I think for me personally, the single biggest thing was freedom. And this is not just when I started, but even all along the way. What happened is roughly about why don't I take a minute and actually take everyone through, what we used to do. And what we used to do was really, for people in the US, etc., we were trying to run a professional real estate broking firm with a specific focus on rental markets in India, because rental markets in India tend to be completely white collar driven, especially in the large cities. For 5 years, we never went beyond Mumbai. And what we did really was try and attack that and give people a very, very professional real estate broking experience. With that, I just want to take a minute and share a video with you, which is kind of a capture of what we did. Just give me 1 second, guys. I'm going to go offline and bring that back. Are you guys able to see the screen?
Yes, now.
Yes.
I'm just going to play this video. I hope you can hear. It's a 2-minute video.
Want to announce that something pretty complex. Actually, I was looking for a way to get things simple. Normally, the thousand can be such a great experience.
Kent is echoing actually.
Our mission is to help others. So smarter, be better.
So we start with the wish list of all the things that we're looking for in our house. We wanted a house where we
And
could
there is an
get
echo.
frequently. Plus we had a really tight budget.
And we wanted a landlord that we were comfortable with, neighbors we were comfortable with, behavior we were looking at.
And we wanted somebody to help us find out exactly what it is.
We work with almost every broker in the market, and we work hard on the ground to ensure we find the houses even before they are out of the market. If it's not the right house for you, we'll go back to our network and find the house that you need.
I looked at the website to look at the kind of houses that were there in the market, what exists at the price.
And then I spoke to the most amazing people. They instantly got our taste.
This is the quantitative process. And
All of us are on full-time salaries and not commissions. Hence, we don't have to go out and close an apartment you don't like. However, if you like something, we'll close it for you.
After interacting with a number of brokers in Bombay, it was really nice to find somebody on your side. Really on your side.
it did a great job in negotiating for us, and we looked after all the paperwork and all the regulations.
Because we were business on reference and clients stand around and say, wow, it was so nice working with you guys. Here's my friend. Can you please help us?
At the end of the whole thing, when we went to the registration, and I had to go on the other side, I thought to myself, you know what? I have a better broker on my side, and I'm glad I worked with them and said, brokers, please.
Welcome to Brokers CSQ.
Then there was a lot of echo. I don't know why there was.
So, sorry, you could see the video very well.
Video was okay. The
Okay.
sound, there was a lot of echo.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Ken,
No.
I think it is feedback.
Yeah. Oh, because we're using Google Meet again. I think Google
Yes.
Meet experience
Yeah,
last time. Zoom. Yeah. But my voice is clear now?
Very clear. It was
Okay.
just the video.
Yeah, got it. No, sorry about that. I hope that gave you guys some kind of idea of what we did. The whole idea was to just give people a professional broking experience. But when we actually started Brokers Please Excuse, the original thought, just to share with everyone, was that we thought that it was such a pity that people had to pay such huge amounts of money just as broking fees, when it really isn't that complicated. So we thought we'll take a website, we'll put up all these houses there, connect tenants and landlords directly, charge no brokerage for that. And really, when you move houses, you spend a lot of money on the move. You have movers and packers, you have cleaning, you have registration, you find a new maid, you need plumbers, you need carpenters. And those were the services that we wanted to offer as ancillary services around the core. And we thought that, finding a house and house broking would be something that we'd offer for free. In 2 months, we realized that the high order bid in client's mind was finding a right house from a broker that understood what their needs were. That was the pain point. Finding a maid, finding a plumber, moving, cleaning, these were all low value added jobs, right? You will ask your broker to help you find a maid, but you'll never ask your maid or your electrician to help you find a new house. And that's really where the client's attention was and what the client was wanting to pay for. And so despite the fact that we'd started with a name called Brokers Please Excuse, we pivoted to actually becoming a premium broker. We became the only broker that actually charged a retainer, and we actually started charging 1 month's fee with taxes because we were a private limited company, etc. And people were happy, and we kept growing purely by word of mouth, simply because the experience was so far ahead of where the general experience was for a particular set of clients. So that was in a very, very quick capture of what we were doing. The aim also was that, we saw that when people were taken to see houses, in 8 out of 10 houses, people would enter the house and realize that this is not a house for them. And good quality pictures that were shared with clients upfront would help, and good quality consulting that was done with the client would help eliminate a lot of that and make it, a selection set out of 4 or 5 good houses versus out of 25 crappy houses. And that's really what our whole business was built on. Understanding client needs, especially for the white collar professional. If you work in a certain job and your kid goes to a certain school and you are in a certain profile, there will only be these 3 or 4 complexes that really are your true selection set because of your commute, your kid's commute, your wife's commute, etc. And if you did that consulting right, then it would just be so much more efficient. If your budget was right, it would just be so much more efficient because you'd not be looking for something that's completely out of your budget. And a lot of that really was what the focus of that business was. And so returning, to what the trade was, on every house that we found, our average revenue originally started at about 30,000, but by the time we closed, which was 5 years down the line when we sold that business, it had moved to about 53,000 rupees. So we used to make 50,000 rupees on an average transaction. We used to charge 2,500 rupees as retainer, which meant that if I got about 10 clients per broker that I had, then I would be profitable and I would be able to pay his salary regardless of whether they closed the house or not. And if they closed the house, then it would be very profitable. And this small little tweak of working with a retainer allowed us to scale hugely, because most brokers in India struggle to scale because they're not sure of how many houses they will close. And if you don't know how many houses that you will close, then it becomes a function really of how much you're willing to invest. You'll have slow periods. The moment we went to that retainer model, it became so much more easier to scale, and we scaled very, very rapidly once that business model became acceptable. And essentially for us, it was really about then ensuring that our pipeline of clients, our referrals are strong enough, and we just, every time one broker could service 10 people, the moment it went to 15, he would be tapped out and we'd have to get a new person to join the team. And at 20, we'd have 2 and so on and so forth. So it became a very easy process to scale just because of this one small little trick that we discovered, which was around being able to charge and build a business around a retainer model, which, by the way, in the financial industry is very common. So in investment banking, etc., it's very common to cover your base and then charge a higher amount, etc. So coming from another industry, for us, it was very clear that that is the only thing that would help us scale. And it was a lot more difficult for people in the industry to see that. But going back, having said the fact that it was a very profitable business, a deep business, you made a lot of money, your average salary cost was about 25,000 rupees per month per person in 2010, and you made 50,000 rupees when you closed the house, which means that a guy, if he closed one house every 2 months, was a very profitable resource for you, which meant that as a business, it was rich enough that you didn't have to actually go out and raise capital and invest for scaling that business. From the time we started to the time we closed, we scaled by almost 30x without ever having to raise capital from anybody except a few close friends who we went out. I'll share that also with you. But when I look back at that whole period and look at what I did versus what I see a lot of people do when they raise capital. I think the single biggest thing was just I was looking for freedom, right? I already was at a reasonably senior level at Edelweiss and had a great boss. And when I went out and met some VC firms for the first time, I realized that, I couldn't work with these guys because, I used to work with a Rashesh and a Venkat who were founders of Edelweiss. And I just realized that I hadn't quit my job to report to analysts at VC firms, which is what I would be doing if I accepted capital from there. If that's what I wanted to do, I was better off going back to Edelweiss and doing whatever, because I had I had a great boss there, to put it very simply, right? So it was really freedom that bootstrapping gives you, which when you go down the fundraising route and are answering to investors, no matter how nice the investors might be, which gets curtailed. The second very big one is that, as a founder, you hate to give away equity. And especially when you go down the fundraising model, it just is something that you got to make your peace with and continue to give away with every successive round and go into that negotiation of how much equity you're going to give away for every single round that you do. And bootstrapping on your own allows you to stay away from that because, between you and your partners, you own 100% of your company. And it just is something that you just don't need like to do. The third, and I think the single biggest benefit that bootstrapping offers is that your life is only focused around one thing, which is your customer. There is no distraction. The customer is the only boss. The customer is the only one paying the bills. You don't have to worry about making a deck, making a PPT, reporting numbers, a bunch of things, apart from statutory things, which are separate. But I'm saying you don't have to worry about managing your investors. And for anybody who's ever raised capital or been in the capital raising game, I think Satish, Sunil, a lot of them will share that managing investors is almost becomes, as important, if not more important than managing customers for founders. And I think one of the biggest advantages that bootstrapping allows you to do is it allows you to focus intensely on customer. On the flip side, obviously the resources that you have are far slower, far lesser, far fewer in every respect. I just don't mean capital, but capital, minds, your ability to hire good quality people. Oftentimes also, VCs apart from capital are also providing a lot of strategic inputs, a lot of ideas, lots of connections, and all those resources are obviously a lot lesser when you're not funded. And so it tends to be a lot slower. I've also seen so many people, like I said, business models can keep morphing. And so your business model, your space could be right, your business model could be completely wrong, and you will still be able to fake it till you make it simply because, you are raising sufficient capital to be able to afford those mistakes. I think the second part of it is that bootstrapping is extremely tiring, especially if you operate in an environment like India. Apart from the usual challenges that every founder will write about, which are about meeting salary every month. You also have so many other issues in India. Around PF, ESIC, GST filings, electricity bills, Wi-Fi, bathrooms, collections, and this whole gamut. I think no matter which founder blog you read from whichever company, I think a lot of the non-business stuff is really the grunt work that tires you out and takes up, and just filings will take up one day of your month. Managing salaries will take up one day of your month. GST filings and reconciliation will take up time. Collections in India tend to be extremely difficult. We were in a retail business, so we didn't have an issue with collections. But if you are in a B2B business, even working with some of the largest companies in India, you'll find that people complain about collections being such a large part of their life. After work has been done, just going back and getting paid in time, etc., is such a large part of, and all of this can combine to be a very, very tiring exercise. But I think the most important thing that you got to make your peace with if you go out and start something of your own is just how lonely it is going to be. I think, you will find that a lot of close friends, who are in jobs will just not have the time for you. When you walk around carrying a card that says, I am vice president of Kotak and, I am head of so-and-so division or whatever, wherever all of us have reached in our lives today, people make time for you. But when you're running a small little business of your own, I think it is not, I don't hold anyone at fault for this. It's just that their priorities are different. Their free time is different. They will still catch a drink with you in the night. But if you were to go out and meet them in office, they'll keep saying, give me 10 minutes, give me 5 minutes, I'm really sorry. But you'll have to make your peace with having to wait 1 hour, 1.5 hours to meet someone whose office you would walk into without announcing yourself prior to that when you were in the same industry and potentially doing business with them, right? So it just can get extremely lonely. The flip side of it also is that, I experienced it, and I think almost every founder experiences it, is that you will also find a number of people who go out and help you for no simple reason except that, they want to help you. You will not expect it, and help will come from the unlikeliest of quarters, and it will always surprise you. But, while that happens, I think in terms of number of people, that will be 5 versus 50 on this side of people that you will be surprised by how little time they're able to make for you now that you're doing something that is completely different, right? And so, does anyone have a comment?
Sorry, I joined a little late. Sunil here.
Hi, Sunil.
To ask questions, or you're taking questions towards the end?
No. I think it'll be good to break the monotony, and it's very tiring to speak one way. So.
So if you can go back to the previous slide that you were talking about, very interesting, I think, point that you brought up. 2 things. I joined a little late, so this seems more of the cons, the problems or challenges that you have had, or the reactions that you had based on the experiences. Did you also cover the positive sides of entrepreneurship, etc.? I mean, I'm not sure if I have missed that out. And secondly, while you talked about equity, and you said giving away equity is a challenge, and you also pointed out that if you do not really raise funds at the right time, I think you end up having fewer resources to grow the firm. So what is the balance in your opinion? Where should people draw a line saying this is what I can do, or is it totally individual based, which I believe is the case?
So very quickly, Sunil, just prior to this also, I talked about some of this. The idea is definitely not to, if I were to just go back here, I talked about, I think you missed that part, which is, I said both of these are a function of your business, your environment, and of course your own personality. And both of them have their own challenges. The route of going the bootstrapping way or fundraising way, both have pros and cons. Some of them I talked about in the next slide. But definitely, the idea is not to romanticize. I think there are so many benefits, and I'll come to that also when I come to the next few slides. But it is definitely, I think, very, very intensely individual, a function of who you are as a person, what you want to do, what you're running from, where you want to go to, so many different things. But definitely, I don't think one is better than the other, and I'm not saying that by any means. I think depending on the business sector, etc., that you are in, fundraising might be inevitable for some businesses.
Yeah, fair point. Thank you.
So yeah, I had just talked briefly about what we went out and did. We were trying to create a platform for the Indian real estate market, and I played a video for you in terms of the testimonial. I had another video, but I won't play that because it's just too bad an experience. But really, I wanted to talk about what Brokers Please Excuse was, how it came into being, etc. And the 3 things I just wanted to talk about was how I started up. Yeah.
If the video is on YouTube, you can just paste the link on the chat, and people can see it after the talk.
Yeah, I'll do that. Where do I do that? Go here and not important. I'll come back to it rather than break the flow. But really, I think the first part I wanted to share was just how I started up. And in 2007, 2008, I met a gentleman called Deepak Jhavar. This was a guy who came from a business family, a Marwadi guy whose family had always been in business, and he'd also been in business. He was about 3 years older than I was. And after about 15 years of working, he started working after his 12th, built a business, sold a business, did another couple of interesting businesses himself. And then he realized that in India, suddenly there were all these people offering 50, 60 lakh rupee salaries. And to him, at that point in time, it was unthinkable. And he wanted to experience what corporate life was about. And someone introduced him to me, and I ended up hiring him for my team. And he used to report into me for 2-3 years. And we became very, very close friends. And we did a lot of good stuff together. And then by the time 2010 rolled around, DJ, as I used to call him, really started chasing me down, saying, I've seen so much of you now, and why is it that you don't want to do business on your own? Why are you happy to just work for someone else? And it was really a question that I had never asked myself. While, a lot of us make a lot of business plans in our minds, etc., it was really not something that I'd seriously asked myself. And so I kept giving him different reasons for why, I didn't want to start up. We kept mulling over ideas and, talking every day, every night. And one fine day on Valentine's Day in 2010, he called me. My wife and I used to live about 3-4 kilometers away from where he lived. And he called me and he said, I've just got something that I've got to share with you. And he came and rang my bell in the middle of the night, came in and put a Valentine card on the table where his son and his daughter had made a Valentine card featuring him and me. And, he said, my son is 12 years old, my daughter is 15 years old. And, Marwadis, especially business family Marwadis, get married really early. And he said, I have just learned that, kids have a very unique sixth sense. And if my kids think that I should do something with you, I think I should do something with you. So I am ready to start tomorrow. You tell me what is holding you back. And he said that we've been talking about it loosely. And I went and told him that, look, I really think, it had been about 3-4 years since I'd hired anyone less than 10 lakh rupees of salary. So, I lived in a very different financial world. The junior most guys who reported into the guys that reported into me were at about 10, 12, 15 lakh rupees salary at that time. And I said, look, I don't know how we will be able to afford starting up a business, because while I have made enough money that I will be able to take care of myself and my own family, I don't think I can bring significant money into a business. So he said, how much money can you bring in? And my answer to that was 20 lakh rupees. So he said, okay, are you okay with 10 lakh rupees? So I said, yeah, I'm okay with 10 lakh rupees. So he said, both of us will, because my apprehension was that DJ, coming from a business family that had many, many businesses, would just continue to bring in capital, and I would not, we'd start up together, build something, and then he'd bring in more capital. I wouldn't be able to match it, and hence be pushed out on the side. So what DJ went out and told me is that he said, we'll put in 10 lakh rupees each. And 10 lakh rupees is a lot of money. And the day we run out of this 10 lakh rupees, we'll shut our business and we'll not. And so I said, that sounds fair, except that it seems unbelievable to me. He said, no, let's take that leap of faith. He actually quit his job and started up. Another guy who reported to the two of us joined in, and I started up. I actually quit and joined him a little later. I was employee number 3 in my own company, I'm ashamed to say. But effectively, we committed 10 lakh rupees each. In actual practice, we put in 5 lakh rupees each. And by the end of the first year, our monthly salary bill was north of 10 lakh rupees a month. And we never ever needed to raise any more capital, right? So it was just a measure of how disconnected I was that I said that I need a lot more money. And I think a lot of us just, lose touch with reality and lose touch with how far money can actually take us. And that was really my biggest experience with DJ. A lot of the things were just demons in my own mind. The risk, I'm going to talk about it a little later, but the risk was grossly overstated in my own mind. I shared the survey results at the beginning, and 75% of the people who want to start up and have not started up say that it is way too risky, and that is why they think it's very risky. And that is exactly what I used to think too, And one fine day, in the middle of all of this, I think there was this one moment that I remember. DJ and I had gone somewhere on my scooter, And I used to open my scooter ka dabba and I used to put my helmet in and I used to lock my scooter up. And DJ turned to me and he said, क्या करता है तू? मतलब हर मीटिंग के पहले तू 5 मिनट ये स्कूटर का डब्बा खोलता है, हेलमेट अंदर डालता है. तो ऐसे हाँ चोरी हो जाएगा. तो इसे यार मैं जिंदगी में स्कूटर चलाया हूँ, कभी हेलमेट चोरी नहीं हुआ मेरा. तो और तू लाइफ में इतना बड़ा रिस्क लिया है, तो क्या 200 रुपए के हेलमेट के लिए इतना टेंशन रहता है? Let's go for the meeting. And it was just a very, very big moment that a lot of the risks that we worry about, etc., are just so trivial. We spent so much of our time because we used to go in real estate. You had to do 20 meetings, and we used to be dashing around the whole city on our scooter. So every meeting I'd go, I'd open my scooter, lock it, then I'd come back, then I'd open it, and then I just stopped doing it. And it just opened up. I think for me, what DJ did was like he really opened up, my eyes, and I realized how little money we actually need and how little risk there really is if you run business the right way. And it really is just common sense. There's no big shit to it. You don't do stupid stuff and let the market determine what you're doing. By way of raising capital, we never raised capital formally. As I mentioned very briefly, in about a year of working, we started making a very good name for ourselves. Clients in the whole white collar segment began to really appreciate and like and refer us. And sure enough, we got calls from a few VCs because they saw, professional guys running a very interesting business, scaling well, etc. And they began to call us in. And we went and did a couple of VC meetings. Specifically, we met Kalari, a lady called Vani Kola, and then we met Sequoia, and I think we met Safe. These are the 3 VC firms that we interacted with. And out of those meetings, what I said back there, it was very clear to me that I and DJ were incompatible. What we wanted to do for our business was very, very different from what these guys wanted to do. They wanted us to rev up the engines, chase a lot more growth, burn a lot more capital, and really, put the pedal to the metal and go after growth at any price. And for us, we were very clear that we were 40 years old and we didn't want to kind of go out and lose this business that we had finally, with a lot of hard work in the first year, we really got it going and we didn't want to lose it. So we were very different from where VCs wanted to be. And the moment that realization came, I think it was clear that we wouldn't raise money professionally. And then what we went out and did was that we went to a few friends and we really told them, and Devashish, from our batch was one of those 5 friends, but 5 close friends, we went out and said that we really built this business up now to a point where, we would hate to lose people because we aren't able to pay our monthly salary bills, although we don't anticipate that happening, but we want to build up a little bit of a war chest. So with a monthly salary bill of 10 lakh rupees, we raised 25 lakh rupees from 5 people, 5 lakh rupees each. And they were under no apprehension. We told them that this money, most startups fail and this will also most likely fail in the fullness of time. So don't have expectations, just give us this 5 lakh rupees. And we put it into a separate bank account. And by the way, from that day to the day we sold the business, we never touched that bank account. It was a reserve bank account. We never needed to touch it. But we did raise this capital. And when we sold our business, we were able to give them a modest return on their money, nowhere near what they would have expected, I'm sure, when they gave us that capital. But the point is that, we were very clear that we were only raising some backup capital. And we were not, and I think for whoever of you raises capital, it is very important to raise capital from the right investors and with the right expectations. If you are going to raise capital, invariably you'll end up talking up your business. And it is a very, very tricky one because you obviously have to talk up your business in order to raise capital. But if you go to friends, family, and fools, as they're called, angel investors typically tend to be one of the 3. I think it's very important that you set the right expectations when you raise that capital, otherwise it can lead to a lot of, damaged relationships. And of course, I think, the same is also true of the money that we didn't raise from professional investors. Professional investors had a certain expectation of what you wanted to do. They wanted you to do with that business, and we didn't raise it. And I think that's the one thing that I'm really proud of. And I think I didn't raise money from the people with whom I was incompatible, and I raised money from the people with whom I was compatible. And I think that's what led to it being a very nice and pleasurable outcome for me throughout the entire experience and finally when we exited. And finally, I also want to touch upon why we exited that business. By 2014-15, three things became very clear to us. The first was that India as a market really was in serious trouble in the real estate space. The headwinds were very evident, although they may have got recognized outside a little later, maybe a couple of years later than that. Sitting in the market, it was very clear that things were going to be very, very difficult going forward. Second is exactly what I talked about earlier, the curse that all of us have, which is the fact that we have an alternative. For a lot of people, they don't have an alternative. The business they do is all they do in life. In our case, there was always the temptation to go back and do, in my case, go back to finance and do what I used to do. And hence, the opportunity cost was also pretty large. And so, that was really reason number two, that if the business didn't scale at the pace, by that time, I think we were making enough money, equivalent money to what we would make in our own careers if we were in a job. But the work that we had to do for it was a whole lot more, right? The effort, the sheer intensity, what it took out of our family lives. I used to travel, leave my family in Mangalore, take a train, go to Bombay every Monday, be there for the entire week and take a train back every Friday. And this was like for 4 years of my life, I did that nonstop. And I think a lot of those things really were things that were not commensurate with the money that I was making out of it, or I could see myself making out of it over the next 3, 4, 5 years. And on the other hand, there was, of course, the whole financial industry where, like I said earlier, I had my networks. I had a lot more advantages on a relative basis. And hence, that opportunity cost was very, very high. And the third big reason for why we exited was that, as I told you, it was not just that DJ and I started, but a whole bunch of people from our team had also taken that leap of faith, and they had come out and bet on us. And 5 years later, it was clear that this business would not make anywhere near the kind of money that they would have made in their old jobs. Even if I were to talk about myself, if in 2010, I'm just using a very rough number, if in 2010 in my peer group, I would probably have been in the top 10 to 15% of, net worth in my peer group. By 2015, and even all the way up to 2020, I would say, even now, I would be in the bottom 25% of my peer group, right? While we didn't lose money and we made a decent amount of money, etc., I think careers grew at such a pace that people who reported into me started making so much more money than what I was making. And in that 5-year period, I would have gone so far behind that the catch-up of that hasn't happened to this day, I would say. And that, I think, is the third big reason, that for a bunch of those people who had also bet on us, it was about finding them a good house. And when we sold that business to Edelweiss, they got back their titles if they were, VP at Edelweiss before they started. They got back there, and we placed them all very nicely, because that was something that they had taken a leap of faith on us, and it was incumbent on us to find and reciprocate that leap of faith that they took. So these three were, I think, the primary reasons why we finally exited. Otherwise, from a pure business point of view and opportunity point of view, it exists to this day. It's still a very rich business. It's still something that, if somebody were to start today, the opportunity is just as rich. The competition is just as poor, just as unorganized. Broking is just as broken in all of India. And I think it's just as rich a business. I could start all over again today if I wanted to, and nothing has changed from 2010 in terms of industry dynamics. I think, just also wanted to share, I went to this Wayback Machine where, all these websites last night, Dave Western, I went and took a few snapshots of the website as it was when we launched. And I think I just want to share for those of you who are, starting up or planning to start up or have just started up. When I went out and started, all of you know that I was in mechanical engineering in engineering college. And, those who are closer friends will know that when we had to type our thesis project, I realized that there's no way that I am going to be able to type my thesis project because I never sat on a computer. So, we really begged and borrowed and redid Sujata and Srishti and Ashima. And, they really literally typed out our project reports for us, right? Because that's how bad we were on a computer. We never sat on a computer in our life. But when I went out and started Brokers Please Excuse, I realized very early on that it was very, very important that, between me and DJ, one of us learned how to code and learned how to work with. And also what we realized was that putting a product out there very, very quickly and getting customers and getting customer feedback was very, very important. So this was the first website version that we put out. And it was actually reasonably ahead of its time at that point of time because we gave this ability for people to go onto a map, which in 2010 was relatively ahead of its time in India. Even in the US, apart from one or two sites, nobody else was really doing this. And you could really say that this is my office and I want to look within a radius of that and zoom in and zoom out and see all these properties popping up and then see pictures for every one of those properties. And it took a lot of effort and hard work to do that. But the really, really, really nice thing that I think we did was that we put a live chat on with, we found a piece of software called LiveZilla that allowed us to actually in 2010 sit at the back end and monitor clients who came onto our website and see what they were browsing for, what they were looking for. And DJ had a very simple point of view to this. There were lots of thoughts and ideas. People said, oh, it is intrusive if you suddenly pop up and start talking to people, etc. But we would ping people and say, hey, can I help you? And DJ's simple point of view then was that if someone comes into my shop, which is really what my website is, because that's where we're getting our customers from, then I want to tell people, hey, how can I help you today? Because he's come into my shop. And as we spoke to customers, we realized that people started referring to us as that they were telling people about us as that website where people talk to you. That's what was the descriptor of our business. And that's really, I think, what helped us build a lot of our business without any marketing dollars, because just the sheer level of customer experience that we were offering was something nobody was. We were counseling people on, if we saw that they were looking for a 40,000 rupee house, which was a 3-bedroom in Bandra, we were counseling people and telling them, look, this is not happening. If we saw that his name was Muhammad Aslam, we were actually picking up the phone and telling him, look, there are only these 4 markets in Bombay that you realistically can look for a house, because if you go to Vile Parle, people are going to deny it to you because their housing society is not going to allow them to give it to a Muslim. Now, this was very, very contentious because it was politically incorrect, etc. And so we had cases where a couple of Muslim guys were like, hey, how can you even say that? And then we would get on the phone and speak to them and tell them that, look, I'm only doing this because I don't want you to be insulted. When you go into the landlord's house, the guy is going to tell you to your face, and you are my client, and I don't want you to go through that. And we've learned this the hard way. And then people began, in fact, I would go so far as to say that in the Muslim white collar space, we had 100% market share. There was virtually no Muslim guy who came into Bombay who would not do business with us simply because we were so good with handling that one very, very delicate part. Most brokers in India will just be so damn politically incorrect. They'll say, Acha, oh, Muhammad Aslam, they'll put the phone down. They'll stop talking in the middle of a sentence saying, Ye mera kaam kar nahi hai. The fact is that there are markets and communities where they can find a house if you're Muslim, where you can find a house if you're Christian and eat non-veg, and there are houses that you can't. And that's your broker's job. And so a lot of our business was really around identifying micro communities, and each of these communities became incredibly valuable. I'll just give you one factoid. There is a building called Oberoi Splendor. It is a 6-tower building that has 6 towers of 30 floors each, 4 flats on each, so about 700, 800 odd flats, out of which at any given moment of time, about 200 flats are out on rent. Every month you have about 20, 30 flats in that are being recycled. Somebody's going out and somebody's coming in. And just out of that one building, we used to do 4 or 5 flats every month per broker. We had 3 brokers servicing that. So, we used to make about 7-8 lakh rupees a month out of just one building in Mumbai. You analyze that, you're talking of about 1 crore of rupees, give or take, from one building in Mumbai only. And that is enough revenue for most businesses to sustain and do very well on, right? And that really is how rich this business is. In Oberoi Splendor, we knew every single landlord, every single flat. We knew when it was going to get emptied, even before it was going to get emptied. We had a tenant in there even before it went out on the market. And we made so much money just out of that one micro market. And, every one of you that starts up will find that there are these micro communities that you just fit perfectly. If you read Paul Graham, he'll talk to you about how Airbnb found its first 100 customers. But every single retail business will have this micro community. So we had Muslims, we had white collar professionals. Another segment that we completely killed was anybody who came from out of town into Mumbai, who didn't know Mumbai. To this day, if you come from out of town into Mumbai, there are only so many communities that you can live in, right? Because if you come from Singapore, your expectation of what is base living conditions will not be met by 90% of Mumbai. If you come from Delhi, your expectations of what base living conditions are will not be met by 80% of Mumbai, and so on and so forth. So we used to do very, very well with certain micro communities, and those really made us very, very intensely profitable. And so whatever retail business you do, I think a lot of times I see the mistake that people make is, they're building a generic product for a generic set of clients, and no such thing exists. What you are solving are specific pain points for very specific clients, and there's a lot of money to be made in that. And especially even as you read a lot of stuff about, tech startups, etc. also, you'll find the same theme repeat itself over and over again. That community, if you can identify and completely target, and then it becomes very easy also. You are then able to find lists of people from that. I'm not referring to Muslims as a community, I'm talking about each business segment as a community. You're then able to target it, focus it, be very, very pointed in your advertising, in your customer acquisition. And a lot of that virtuous cycle really starts kind of flowing. And it is very, very important for a bootstrap startup to be able to identify that very quickly. Because if you're building a generic product, you'll keep building a product for years and years and will never be able to go to market with it meaningfully. The second big thing, again, on the same theme of being close to your customers, you saw that we actually made a name for ourselves and our initial clients liked us because we had this map. But as we kept talking to clients, we discovered that it was the live chat. We were getting a lot of our clients from live chat. And as we were talking to them, we realized that most people were struggling to use a map. Remember that 2010, 11, 12 are very different from 20, 21, 22. At that point in time, when people saw a map, they just froze, right? And what people found a lot more easier was what we pivoted to, which was, I want to live in Lower Parel. Click on Lower Parel, say 2-bedroom, say my budget, say my number of bedrooms, and go and hit Lower Parel, and it will show you everything. And then, that was a far, far more easier construct for people because people just didn't know how to navigate a map. And what we found was that the moment we made this switch, because 8 out of 10 customers were telling us, what's a map app, theek hai, lekin humse use nahi ho raha, and they loved this interface. We also found that our original, fans were very upset because they liked the fact that we were the only guys with a map. And so we brought this thing in where we said, I'm a proud geek, I will choose starting map, and clicking on that took you to that interface. And we had a good 15-20% of our customers who preferred to use that, but almost for everybody else, this was what they wanted to and were more comfortable using. But I think it was important. You will also see another change that it used to say renting made free fun easy, the free went away. As we realized that there is a lot of demand for high quality premium brokers and not for free broking, we pivoted to being a premium broker. And that free word went away and we just went. And the story became that once you start dealing with us, you will never need to deal with all these painful Ismail, Dominic, Savio, Rahul, standalone brokers that you have a poor experience with. You can say brokers please excuse to all of them and start working with us. In fact, when you moused over our logo, it would give all this explanation to you. And really, people don't care. People just care about the experience. You could be called, my favorite, one of my favorite eating places in Mangalore is called Timmanna Fish Joint, and fish is misspelled on his board, and it doesn't matter because he just serves the best damn fish that there is in this town, right? It's a really small, tiny machli kind of place in the outskirts of Mangalore. But really, the fact that you're called brokers please excuse. If we had had a VC funder and we had had a whole master plan that talked about how we were going to be zero cost brokerage, broking for free, etc., we'd never be able to make this change. And I think a lot of that is just the freedom to be able to stay close to the customer. Customers were very happy to pay us whatever we wanted to, because their point of view was, hey, we are anyway paying it to all the other brokers. Why shouldn't we pay you? And that was really, there was a lady called Surabhi Gupta who we found a house for, she used to be the India head for Disney. And this was one of those pivotal moments again. Our fees at that time was whatever, 1 month plus this thing, and she paid us that, and she was very happy. And then we got a call from her father, who was a gentleman called Chand Gupta. And we had never interacted with her. We had only interacted with her and her husband, never met him. And he called me and he said, you know, my daughter told me that this is what you're doing. Can I come to your office? So we went to his, he came to our office. And he said, no, you've done a fantastic job. And I've been a businessman all my life. And it's great to hear what you're doing. And oh, by the way, here is, he wrote a check for 1 lakh rupees. So we had found a house for her in one of the nicest buildings, Ashoka Gardens in Bombay. Her bill was 1 lakh rupees, and he wrote us a check for another 1 lakh rupees. And he put it on the table and he said, here, you guys take this. And we said, no, this is not our fees. Why are you paying us? And he said, I've been an entrepreneur. I know how difficult it is. And, you know, just take this and use it for whatever it is that you've been skimping on. And we actually went and hired a couple of people that we were not wanting to hire because we now had that money in our pocket. And that was really the first time we hired excess capacity, because we started scaling once. In order to scale, we had to make that leap of hiring ahead of time. And I think it was very, very important for us. And that's also going back to the same point that I was saying about, you know, somebody or the other will come in and help you that you least expect. We didn't even know this man, and he came in of his own volition saying, I'm retired. I've had a huge career. I've done very well for myself, but I want to just encourage you guys. So, and lastly, you know, this is what we kind of went to eventually when we went and, you know, made more money, got like Ruby on Rails website up, started doing a lot of testimonials, started investing in content around locality guides. We used to write the best locality guides on every city in the country, every suburb in the city. You know, a lot of active client referrals. We had something called the Golden Tiffin Box Award, where we used to give people like this really nice tiffin box at work with a really nice sticker that made them talk about brokers to excuse in their office when they got that wonderful tiffin box. It was called the Golden Tiffin Box Award, and we sent them a physical tiffin box and had a Facebook version of that got us a lot of mileage. But eventually, we went to, you know, a much more professional site. This picture that you see also was a rotating carousel. A lot of people we discovered really liked photography. A lot of clients in our target segment. So we made this like a photography contest, and we'd give credit to the person whose picture was chosen. And we just found that also a very, very deep source of engagement within our client set in Mumbai. And I think my whole, you know, this site was a lot more professional looking than the one that I was showing you previously. But because your core product was the client experience and the interaction and how you found a house and how you closed the house for them, a lot of this really, it didn't matter that we had a very, very primitive looking site, and then we had, I mean, this was when we could afford it, we did it, but it had no significant uptake in our business. We did very well with a very, very rough and rudimentary site because we were delivering what clients wanted. So for those of you who are starting up, I think the only piece that I would share is that get very close to your client and deliver what you know, solutions to client problems that you're looking for, and don't waste too much time on UI, UX, you know, look, feel, etc. Because people just waste. I've seen people waste, you know, hundreds and thousands of dollars, and more importantly, a lot of time. And then what they're building eventually ends up being completely junk because clients are not having that problem in the first place. Moving on, I think to what I learned as a founder. I think the first one is that, you know, even in the survey, and as I shared with you, when I started up or when I was reluctant to start up, it was always around this perceived 4-letter word called risk, and, you know, how risky things are if you start up on your own, etc. And really, I'm here to tell you that there is almost zero risk that you will take when you start up, right? Apart from opportunity cost, etc., etc. You know, the fact of the matter is that virtually the market will tell you everything, right? If you're close to your customers, you will keep adapting, and you will not do something that makes no sense. Now, you will see that a lot of venture-funded companies will do something that, you know, for example, they will burn a lot of capital, etc. But you must keep in mind that even there, for a founder, there is very little risk. The investors come in and said, I want you to invest and burn this money in order to grow really fast. And it's a calculated risk. And at a personal level, I think it's a great experience. It's another set of skill sets. And again, you're almost never going to starve simply because you started up. So I think this whole perception of risk around starting up is hugely overrated. If you stick to the knitting and stick to a real life problem that you're solving for your customers, there's almost no risk. The second, even bigger one, I think, is that a lot of people quit their jobs because of excitement or the hunt for excitement. They think that they are maybe, stuck in going nowhere, or that they could always come back to doing this, but they want to do something exciting. And I must say that starting up universally, if you talk to startup founders, you will almost universally hear one thing for sure, which is that there is very, very little excitement. If he's really a friend of yours, he'll tell you that there's very, very little excitement. Maybe on the day that you do actually quit your job and buy your domain name for your business, there is a lot of excitement. You have thought of a new great name and gone and got that domain and bought it, etc. I think for a couple of days there might be excitement, but immediately after that, the moment it comes to putting the website up and getting a Shop and Establishment Act and putting up a board and finding an office and hiring people and paying salaries, I think a lot of it is just unending grunt work, right? And I think you've got to be driven by something very different than the hunt for excitement. One of the people that I respect the most was the founder of Edelweiss, Rashesh Shah. And one of the things that he used to say was that you really have to distinguish between satisfaction and pleasure. And the example that he gave, which I've always quoted to everyone, is on the pleasure side, working at McDonald's and winning Employee of the Day is, people clap for you and they'll put your picture up and all of that. And it will give you a lot of pleasure. But satisfaction is really running a marathon, right? So I see so many of us also now are running, etc. And, you hate every single day when you get up to run. You hate every minute when you run. Even when you run the final race, you hate every single moment of the race. Your body is complaining. You just hate it all the way to that one moment where you finish. And that is really satisfaction. And startup running your own business, I think is very, very similar. You've got to be clear what you're looking for, and it has to give you a lot of satisfaction, and if that's for you, that's for you. If that's not for you, that's not for you. There's nothing romantic about it. There's nothing gorgeous about it. There's nothing. It's just who you are as a person, and that's what you got to find. And largely, I think people just don't, a lot of people pay lip service to it. I think a lot of us who've grown senior, Demons, when he talked about it, also talked about it. I think your co-founders, the employees, and the culture that you have in your own company, I think what has also happened in today's world is that, the world has become a lot more transparent. So if you're like a really shitty guy and treat people really poorly, you'll get away with it for a little bit of time, but it'll eventually percolate. And it'll also be noticeable in the quality of service or product that you deliver to your clients. And I think that is a very, very important, of course, there is no, I'm not saying that everyone needs to have bean bags and free coffee. Different companies will have different cultures that work for them. Some could be more cutthroat, some could be more open, some could be convivial, some could be extremely disruptive. But whatever it is, every company will have a certain culture, and that will reflect in its output and its delivery in the fullness of time. And I think it's very important to recognize that because for me especially, there was this one moment where I went and spent time with Venkat, who's one of the co-founders of Edelweiss, and I was struggling with a decision on doing something where the reason I didn't want to do it was because as a large company, I wouldn't be able to do it. And it was really about treating people very differently. It was really about, we had gone out and hired, in our second year, we'd hired 2 people from IIM Calcutta, right? And obviously they came, it was unthinkable because the kind of people and the kind of company that we had, people wouldn't hire people from IIM Calcutta, but we got tired of hiring poor quality people. So we said, let's take the leap of faith and pay whatever it takes. We went out, made PPTs, stood in the campus process and hired 2 guys from there. And we obviously had to treat them very differently from how we treated the remaining set of people in our company because they obviously had a very, very different expectation. And we were struggling with why that should be the case. And I went to talk to Rashesh about it. Rashesh didn't find time, Venkat did, and I spoke to Venkat about it. And what Venkat ended up saying was that, hey, Ken, don't complicate your life with what things will be when you're a large company. When you're a large company, you won't be able to do this. But today, as a small company, you're able to do it. So just do it. And I think that became a defining part of what, we did whatever worked for us at that moment of time without worrying about whether it will scale. I find, especially a bunch of my close friends who run startups or have run startups or continue to run startups, they just have these notions that have come to them from their time in the corporate workplace. And they're like, oh, I'm small now, but how will I do this when I'm large? Worry about that later. Worry about what you are today and what you can do today and what you can manage today. And lastly, Sunil, going back to that point that you raised, my only one regret after 5 years of bootstrapping it is that I just fell overly in love with the notion of bootstrapping, right? And as I turned around and went out and became an investor today, and as I go out and see a bunch of people now come to me and present, etc., and get funded, etc., I really say that, if it is because I didn't go out and raise capital that maybe someone who wasn't as good as me in that particular business went out and raised a lot more capital, because there was capital available. People wanted to invest it. They were looking for the opportunity. In fact, I will go a step further and say that I was so bad that if I had actually sat across the table with Masayoshi-san and he had told me, hey, I want to invest $100 million in your business, you know what my answer would have been? My answer would have been that I don't need it because I don't know how you can deploy $100 million. And I think if your own mind is not thinking of a business in large enough terms, where if someone's saying, I'm going to invest this money, and you say, oh, I don't think there's enough opportunity, then why are you wasting your time in that business? Then you clearly don't think about this business as large enough or big enough for it to be really, at one level you say, I want to build a large business, I want to cause a dent in the universe. But at another level, when push comes to shove, someone saying, hey, I'm going to invest it in this space, which was the case for us, for example. You're saying, hey, not me, I don't want to share, I don't want to raise capital, I don't want to grow. And really, my only big regret is that I think if I had raised capital, maybe I would have been in a different place and grown that company very differently. I have no other regrets. Like I said, not making money or becoming relatively poor, etc., are absolutely things that don't matter. But this one I do. I think it just reflects very poorly on my own sense of vision that I had for my own business. And I think that is the saddest thing. If you don't have a great, fantastic vision for your own business in some parallel universe, then who else will have? So I think those are the.
Ken, I think that's a very good point, and I really love the fact that you said you were in love with being a bootstrap business, and that's exactly how I am today. But having said that, I think I've probably done something similar to what you did, raised some small amount from some close friends and ex-colleagues, etc. I have attended a few of the VC meetings. We did present. But to be honest, I think it was half-hearted. I mean, I was never in to raise capital. I went in, but I think the thing that you said initially, wherein I don't think I would want somebody else to control my way of thinking, my vision for the company. So that's one of the drawbacks. But I know what you're saying now, wherein there are times when you probably need to open up and accept the funding, because that probably will give you the right resources and opportunity to grow faster and meet the vision as you expect.
No, 100%. I think now with the benefit of hindsight, and now that I can look back and smile, and I think मेरा खुद का चुतियापा था, मतलब I was fundraising is incredibly hard. It is far harder than business, right? Because you have to go out and like I said it was my ego. If truth be told, for me it was ego. I didn't want to report into that analyst, so to speak. But the fact is that if I'm going to raise capital, and if that guy is the guy who's going to give me the capital, then I have a fiduciary responsibility to report into him. But it was my own ego that prohibited me from going out and actually, saying that, hey, if this is what I need to do, this is what I need to do. And I think, that is the only part that I want to raise here, that, fundraising is incredibly hard, and it's very easy to, let your ego come in and say that, hey, I don't need this, I'll do this the hard way. But it's not that that way is any easier. It is also if you say कि मैं कफन मान के fundraising करूँगा, you'll find that it's not as easy as you think it is. And that, I think, for me at least, I think I did everything else absolutely right. I think that's the one thing that I did very, very poorly, in that I made not fundraising a virtue and romanticized it overly, and I don't think that is a good thing.
So I would share one other thing, which is actually very important here. So in the last 2-3 months, we have signed up some very good clients like Infosys, Mindtray. We are currently talking to, Wipro, Microsoft and all. Now, Infosys, in one single month, we actually got approval for almost 1.5 CR business. Now, that was a great thing, but very funny because I was wondering, how the hell would I be managing the cash flows now?
Yeah, the working capital out of that is easy.
Exactly. Yeah, so that was actually, a big challenge. And I think that's where the fundraising or that extra cash in hand is extremely critical for a business.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And I think the second part again is the same thing, right? I began by saying that in B2B businesses, you can still get away because your client, if you get 2 big clients, you can actually bootstrap much easier, right? Like you're actually giving me exactly that. But what you're saying is that even though I have a 1.5 crore out of the working capital required for it is something that I'm struggling with, right? So it is actually true that fundraising has its own place in life in building a large business. And and the fact of the matter is that even if you look at people that people hold up as icons like a Steve Jobs, etc., even they did go out and raise significant capital. It may not have been the gazillions of dollars that the Indian startups today are raising or international startups today are raising, but there is a good balance between bootstrapping completely versus fundraising appropriately that is important to strike. And I think that's the biggest mistake that I made. I think the last part is what I've learned as an investor. Now, 2021, actually, now I've spent more time as an investor than a founder, because now it's been 6 years that I've been an investor. And I think the first one is that there are no cheap treats, right? Quality founders are extremely rare, and not just are they rare, but they're also extremely difficult to manage for a reason, right? It takes a lot to start up at all. Out of that, it takes a lot to then go to the next level and be in business for more than a short period of time. And then it takes a lot to actually do something more meaningful than that and be actually able to raise capital. What we do as investors also, I think, just to share with everyone, we're very kind of different as investors, because we invest in slow growth traditional businesses. We invest slightly larger checks between 50 and 150 crores into more traditional slow growth businesses that have been started by founders and run for several years on their own. Typically, our founders have run these for 10, 12 years as a proprietorship or as a standalone business, and we are the first external capital and providing them growth capital. And oftentimes we are investing this in businesses, with that being the last ever round of external capital raising that they need, right? So, what we've seen, at least out of that, is that quality founders are extremely difficult to find, because it's taken a special kind of person to be on their own for so long. Sunil, Praveen, Satish, all of these guys you'll find, they've made their peace with who they are, right? Vijay Anand, all of the people who've been on their own and doing their own thing for a decent amount of time, you'll find that they've made their peace with who they are. They've made their peace with the car that they drive, with the shirts that they wear, with the schools their kids go to, all of these things, because, they're driven by something very different. And that really is, the longer and bigger that you look at it, you'll find that these founders are thoda sarfira for a reason. And hence they are also very, very difficult to manage. And so it's also extremely difficult to find good quality founders. I think a lot of people, for example, wrote in that they want to invest in startups. And I only say that, who a person is very, very difficult to gauge unless you see him in action in his own business for an extended period of time and see how he behaves through good times and bad times. The second is I think the largest job that an investor has is really to complement and complement. The biggest thing that founders need is energy, right? I think Sunil will testify to this. All of you who have been founders will testify to this. It just gets extremely tiring, and what you're looking for is energy. And the single largest source of that energy is your investors, your backers. And that's oftentimes far more valuable than the money that they might give you. And secondly is, of course, the fact that there is complementary skill sets, and you often will be able to help in areas where they themselves might be weak. And lastly, I think strategy means absolutely fuck all. It has got no meaning whatsoever. At a very broad level, it may still be valuable, but broadly it just comes down to executing very, very well. And that's something that, very few investors can help with. It's really something that you have to do on your own as a founder. But as an investor, it's important to realize that, ज्ञान देना बहुत easy है, but उसका कोई value नहीं है. You'll only end up antagonizing those founders. You'll end up spoiling those relationships, and then there's no value to anything. The next one is that, all the logic in the world will fail against a determined founder. I see it especially in this COVID year, where, a couple of our founders, we invested in a business called Food Link. They are the most premium banqueting and catering company in India. And, banqueting and catering, as you're aware, is completely shut. So they did the Dhirubhai Ambani wedding, Deepika wedding, Mittal wedding. They did pretty much all of the big weddings. They are the largest name in the luxury wedding space. And they've been shut completely for 1 year. And now they were looking forward to things opening in April, but because of the second wave, they're again shut for at least another 6 months, maybe another year. And how many businesses can manage with zero revenue for 2 years, right? They're going through extremely tough times. And yet, in the middle of all this, the founders got up. He said, India mein kuch nahi ho raha. He went, based himself in Dubai. As we speak today, he is opening his 6th restaurant in Dubai in the last 9 months. He has not had a single rupee to invest. He's managed to convince people to invest that money in a FOCO model. He's opened 6 restaurants, and the 6th one opened like today. He wanted to open it before Eid, but missed because he didn't get an electricity bill clearance or whatever. And just the only word is magic. There is no logic for why he should have grown. So he closed last year as a 180 crore business. And this business that he has put together in Dubai in the last 9 months is already on track to be a 50 crore rupee business for this year. And it's just pure magic. There's no other word for it. He refused to say that I'm going to sit and do nothing and twiddle my thumbs. He said, Dubai is practically a branch office of India. There are enough Indians, 40-45% of people there are Indians, and there's a market for my food there, and I'm going to go out and do it. And it went up and did all of this without raising any capital, without having any capital. He's burning capital just to stay alive in India. So this is all absolutely with no capital whatsoever. And I've seen this now several times over, that all the logic and all the Excel sheets in the world will fail against a determined founder. And lastly, I think, again, as I began in the beginning, and I will caveat this is my own personal opinion. I think you can't do this unless you go all in. People who want to hedge and do this and have a foot in 3 different jobs, I think it's just too difficult to run a business to do this on the side. And when I'm saying great founders, I'm not talking about great founders. I'm talking about just good quality founders in a very casual sense of the word great. But I think my general experience is that hedging your bets and saying ye bhi kar deta, I'm doing very clever things and all, मैं salary कमाऊंगा और ये side में यहाँ पे invest करूंगा. You might as well not do it than do it, is my personal opinion, because it's just too damn difficult. I would say you need to go all in, and that's just the only way that anything meaningful will happen out of there. And lastly, all of us are 44, 45, 46 years old, whatever we are. I think it gives me, when we began this whole masterclass, and there was one small comment someone made, I still think that I'm going to start up all over again, because I think I'm just so much smarter, wiser. My networks are so much more powerful than they were when I started up the first time. And I think now there is an increasing body of work that actually shows that the next great startup founders are mostly 40 plus years of age. And I find that incredibly encouraging. And I just want to share that with all of you who are kind of thinking about on the edge. And if I can just push you over the edge and make you jump and take that leap, I think even if one person were to do that, I think that'd be worth its while. Because I think, as I said before, no founder ever starved to death. It's not as risky as you think it is. Abhi nahi karoge to kab karoge. And you're still going to be working for another 30, 40 years of your life. Might as well, give it a go and take 5-10 years to see if you can do anything meaningful with it. So that's just if that's something you dream about. That is not to say that everybody has to, but if it's something that you're dreaming about, then just take the plunge, and I think take the red pill, and it'll open your eyes, it'll open your mind, and you'll find that it's a lot different from what you thought about it before you actually went out and did it. So with that, I'm actually done and up for questions, comments, whatever.
Ken, one quick question, if I, how was your, feeling when you would leave home, Mangalore, every Monday morning when you're starting from home? How was your feeling?
Matlab, difficult one to answer, but whatever you do get used to. So I will just say that it became regular life for me. It started with us being in Bombay. So the history to that is that when I started up, it was in Bombay, but I was spending so much of my time at my startup that my wife, I really had no time for her because I was literally in office 24/7. And I realized that is going to be, a serious problem for me. We were also planning to have kids, right? So we didn't have kids when I started up. So that was another big personal challenge because, if my wife was going to be pregnant and, needing me, etc., then I was just not around and I couldn't afford to be. So the driver of this was actually that. So I said the simple answer to this is that I moved back into my parents' house. My parents and my wife, are mutually able to look after each other, and I'm off and able to focus on doing what I want to do, which is, running my own business. And then when I actually came back, so when I was in Bombay, I was working pretty much when I didn't have a house for 4 years. Just another aside, Sunil, is that for 4 years of my life, I lived in office, right? So there was one sleeping bag that I had, and I didn't have a house for 4 years of my life in Bombay because I didn't see the point of going back to an empty house. So I used to be in office all the time. And then on the weekend, when I would come back home here, then I would not pick up my phone or do anything for those 2 days. And my family had my complete unfettered attention. And so in our own mind, between me and my wife, the way we rationalized it was that I actually gave her more dedicated time and gave the family more dedicated time than I did when I was working in a job in Edelweiss, when I would come back home tired from work every day and maybe just have dinner and go to sleep. Here for 2 days, we'd definitely go watch a movie, we'd go out to eat, we'd do a bunch of things. And then for 4 days, I would be gone every week. So it became part of life, and whatever you get used to, you get used to. So, you don't particularly ascribe feelings to them. It's just the way it turned out, and then it worked for me. So I just continued it for a long period of time.
Thank you. That was very personal answer, but thank you. Great to hear that.
Hey, Ken, this is Deeman. So, hey, fascinating perspective. So thank you. So, hey, I was just wondering, there was one comparison you made, maybe there are various vectors, right? When you say, here would have been my potential trajectory if I continued with Edelweiss, let's say, right? And you were kind of saying financially, maybe it's comparable, not comparable. The other vector potentially is the impact, right? So what's your take? I mean, I remember from your previous talk, you, with Edelweiss, I think you were bringing in some financial instruments for the first time in India, right? The impact and reach is huge,
yeah.
Right? And so how would you compare, because obviously, with a platform like Edelweiss or any other established company, right? I mean, with a similar effort and similar passion, the impact can be much wider.
Undoubtedly.
Yeah.
Undoubtedly. There is no doubt in my mind that, the thing is though that, had I ended up, professionalizing the Indian real estate broking space,
Yeah.
right? I think that would be far, far more transformative.
Yep.
Because real estate really is the biggest asset class in India, right? So if you were to look at the distribution of Indian wealth, right, you will see that 95% of financial assets are FDs. Stocks are really irrelevant, right? Apart from ESOPs, etc. Stocks are really irrelevant as a function of the average Indian's exposure. And then, even if you take all your financial assets, when you go out and buy a house, you liquidate everything and go and buy a house for, 50 lakhs, a crore, 2 crores, 5 crores, whatever it is in whichever part of the country you're in. And so real estate is really such a large part of your, inordinately large part of your wealth in India, because it's also a very primitive market, right? We're not the US where 401ks abound and, where equity is just such a significantly larger part of the economy. So, and this very, very core asset is just so poorly serviced by the broking community that services it. And that, I think, is really what, when I went out to go out and do that, I think the whole idea was that we could potentially change the face of real estate broking in India and really build a mammoth organization. That was the world. The life didn't turn out that way, and things went wrong and things went right, and that's a whole different issue. But I think the idea was to cause an even bigger impact by what we wanted to do. And that is really what was the driver for me, at least.
Yeah.
I used to look at it and say, I'll give you a very simple example. The average IPO in India is a 500, 600 crore IPO, okay? And if you look across from wherever you are in any city in India at the next complex that's coming out, that complex will be a 500, 600 crore complex. It will have 100 flats of 2, 3, 4, 5 crores each, etc. So when a building, any given building is built, the economic activity out of that is as large as an IPO. There'll probably be 100 IPOs in India. But just one small locality in Bangalore will have 100 buildings of that size or more, right? So that's how mammoth this industry really is. And really, I think, even to this day, if somebody comes around and actually professionalizes this industry, I think there can be a Barbara Corcoran here, and there can be a Redfin here, and there can be a Zillow here, because it is such a large part of the economy.
Yeah, no, that's good. I think Smashy, if it's still on, I think I remember he was also, what fascinated me was he was going to change the network infrastructure, right? He was going to.
That's correct.
that was his
and which is, I think part of what I said in the first couple of slides, that, when I'm talking about bootstrapping and starting a business, I'm still talking about, hopefully you're still not talking about starting a small shop and having a cost. Because, when Smashy and I were talking about it, we were saying that obviously a lot of people hate their bosses and want to run away from it, etc., etc. And there is hence this romantic notion ki apna khud ka kuch karna hai. But if it is not something that's going to be meaningful and it's going to be, at least in theory, in some parallel universe, meaningfully big, then really it's going to go stale very, very quickly. And that is, I think, the point I was making back there also. That at least the intent has to be there to kind of have a big impact. And impact can be in very different ways, right? It could be like Sunil is working with entrepreneurs and helping them raise capital. I mean, it can be in many, your own definition of impact. But at some level, it has to be an impact that matters to you. If it's some small little lifestyle business or a Kirana store, I mean, that's not what any of us from KREC are going to go out and quit our careers and jobs in order to do, is the limited point I was making.
Yep, makes sense.
Yeah, if you have your vision broad enough, it'll allow you to pivot and do various things in service of that vision.
But Smashy, now with Salesforce, would you not say, you can do, what's your perspective? I'm not judging it, right? But as a VP in Salesforce and with the same passion, right? And with what you have at your disposal in terms of a platform and reach, right? What would you say on the impact, right? Compared to starting up all over again?
It's different. It's very hard to compare one with the other, because in Salesforce, the purpose of the business is not to improve, let's say, network experience.
Yes.
Right? If we were to take our original idea that I worked on in my past startup,
that's incidental.
Incidental. That's it's in service of improving the business. Is the canvas much bigger? Yeah, I mean it's
because you're not restricted to just pursuing that same idea, right? Smash. You can go do whatever you want.
Exactly. So you have to redefine what excites you in the context of where you are. So let's say if it is in the context of Salesforce, what we are trying to do is look in the post-COVID world where your employees are everywhere. How do you deliver a great experience for them? Right? If network is involved there, great. Otherwise, it's just an interesting problem that you want to solve. So there are different ways of looking at what excites you in whatever context you are in. But the key is set your sights at a broad enough goal so that you can pick and choose multiple things you can iterate on.
And I think even also one other thing that I'd add to what Smashy is saying is that, you in particular asking this question is very different because, you actually found a canvas large enough in the same sense as Smashy is saying, but not everybody might be in the same place, right? So quite oftentimes, when you are in let's say when I was at Edelweiss, while I may obviously put on my CV, the fact is that when I went away from Edelweiss, they hired somebody else to replace me, and that guy would also achieve, whatever it is that organization wanted to achieve.
Yeah.
And I think what drives you about doing something on your own, when Smashy went out to say, okay, or when Praveen is going out to say, I want to run Savin and, build, is that nobody is doing what you want to do, and that's what you are passionate about doing, and really carving out your own space. Whereas in an organization, yes, you are the instrument through which it's happening, but if you're not there, they'll find another instrument for it to happen. You might not, you specifically because of where you've got to, may not completely ascribe to that view, but for a lot of people, they're just a replaceable cog in the wheel, and that is not gratifying at some point of time.
No, that's fair. That's fair.
Hey, I'm gonna stop recording now. I have to drop at 10, but you guys can still continue. I'll just stop recording and then we can continue the question answer session.
Yeah, I have a few things